Hi, good afternoon. I'm Dianne Bystrom. I am co-president of the League of Women Voters of Nebraska, a member of the Humanities Nebraska Speakers Bureau, and director emerita of the Carrie Chapman Catt Center for Women in Politics at Iowa State University. It's my pleasure to welcome you today to the final of a four-part series this fall on valuing the vote. I invite those on Facebook Live. There's Anna waving to us. I invite those on Facebook Live to put in the comment section where they're located. We like to keep track of that. And also to put your questions for our outstanding panel today in the comment section. So as I said, this is the fourth of a four-part series on valuing the vote. It is a series of programming that's made possible from a grant received from Humanities Nebraska from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation as part of its Why It Matters Civic and Electoral Participation initiative. The Mellon Foundation is awarding nearly $2 million in grants to state humanities councils throughout the nation to implement programming under this initiative. Humanities Nebraska chose the theme, Valuing the Vote, to discuss with Nebraskans that the right to vote, although it's been expanded throughout the history of this country, is still something that we need to pay attention to, we need to be watchful, and we need to participate in the vote. The first three programs on Value the Vote focused on the women's suffrage movement and the celebration of the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment. But today's program is going to focus on women in politics today. And we're going to be talking about women as voters and as elected and appointed officials and also as activists. And so we have a great panel assembled for you today. You can watch today the recording of today's presentation as well as the previous programs on the Humanities Nebraska's Facebook page or YouTube channel. So now it's my pleasure to introduce today's speakers. And again, as I said earlier, I'm spending a little bit more time today introducing the speakers than we have in the previous sessions, because I think this will help you frame some of the questions that you'll have for them later, because they all have a very outstanding background. State Senator Anna Wishart represents Nebraska District 27, that's located in Lincoln, Lancaster County, in the state legislature. She was first elected in 2016 with 70% of the vote in a district that is equally divided between Republicans and Democrats. So that's pretty amazing. And as you all know, we do have a nonpartisan state legislature in Nebraska, the only one in the country. She was just recently reelected in 2020. As a freshman senator, Anna was appointed to serve on the Appropriations Committee, and she just got out of a meeting at 2 o'clock today from that committee. She also serves as vice chair of the State Tribal Relations Committee. Prior to her service as a state senator, so pay attention to this because these are the routes these women take. She worked for the Nebraska legislature for 6 years as a staff member. And then she also ran several advocacy and legislative campaigns, and she also served as an elected member of the Lincoln Airport Authority and as chair of that body. Currently, they all have jobs outside their elected in the state legislature anyway. She works as director of Partnerships Beyond School Bells, which is a coalition with the mission to improve access to quality after school and summer school programming for Nebraska's youth, particularly those in rural and underserved communities. Anna was born, raised, and has lived in Nebraska for more than 30 years. She has a degree in film studies from Middlebury College in Vermont. Our next panelist is Michelle Andal, and she has served as the Sarpy County Commissioner of Elections since her gubernatorial appointment in 2017. She's originally from the California beach community of Del Mar, and she moved to Sarpy County in 1998. Prior to serving the voters of Sarpy County, Michelle has had a political and nonprofit consulting business for 25 years in both California and Nebraska. She has a degree in business management and leadership, and she has worked as an independent marketing and fundraising consultant for many political campaigns from the local to federal level, as well as numerous nonprofit organizations. Michelle is involved with many community organizations in Sarpy County, but one of her favorite community partnerships is speaking at naturalization ceremonies for new US citizens, sharing with them the value and the importance of voting and helping them register to vote. Her most recent, and this is impressive, large-scale community service project, and the most impactful to date in a career that's been very impactful, was leading the 2020 Census Marketing and Communication effort for all of Sarpy County as executive director of the Sarpy Complete Count Committee. She spent 18 months of coordinating messaging with mayors, cities, school boards, nonprofits, chambers of commerce, and businesses. And the result of that finished the 2020 census as the #1 responding county in the state of Nebraska. That is Sarpy County, #1. And we had a very high response rate in Nebraska. It was in the high 90s. And so Sarpy County, #1 of all 93 counties. Our last speaker today is Toni Monette. She serves as Director of Voter Services for the League of Women Voters of Nebraska, so the state league, as well as co-director of Voter Services for the League of Women Voters of Greater Omaha, which is our largest local league with almost 400 members. In these roles, Toni has worked on a variety of projects that include expanding our nonpartisan Vote 411 online voter guards, which was expanded to this year to all 93 counties in the state of Nebraska from the local to federal level on up. She also produced the Know Your Voting Rights brochure, which was in an online and printed format. And she works with other various youth and community organizations to increase voter participation. Toni also holds leadership positions in other nonprofit organizations, such as First Vice President of Zeta Phi Beta sorority in Omaha, the Urban League Young Professionals, and the National Council of 100 Black Women of Greater Omaha. Toni currently works for a Department of Education contractor conducting quality assurance on regulations related to federal student loans. She is completing a master's degree in public administration with an emphasis in public policy at the University of Nebraska at Omaha. Before asking our panelists questions about women in politics today, I want to provide a brief framework historically on women as voters and elected officials. So, in 1920, the 19th Amendment enfranchised approximately 27 million voters, just months before that year's presidential election. We don't have a lot of good statistics, but what we know, and basically from a New York Times article that came out around the election in 1920, about 36% of women voted compared to 60% of men. So of course there was a lot of uproar about, see, women didn't really want the right to vote. But if you fast forward to 1968, women now vote in greater numbers than men in every election, presidential election, and most midterm elections than men, so 1968. Now, we all know that women comprise a larger share of the population than men. We're 51% compared to 49%. So in addition to sheer numbers, you need to look at a proportion of the population. So since 1980, a greater proportion of women have voted than men in every presidential election since 1980. In 1920, and we're still counting votes, we're done in Nebraska, but other states are still counting votes. We now have, as of yesterday, a record 158 million people who voted in the 2020 election. And again, preliminary exit polls show that of these voters, of the electorate in general, 52% are women and 48% of men. So that's holding true again, is that women are going to have a larger share of the electorate this year. Okay, now let's get to women in elected office. So in 2020, and these are the elections from this year. It will change a little bit when we get to 2021, but we currently have women. So you've got women, 51% of the country, the biggest share of voters. Where do they rank with their representation? Well, these are all all-time highs, unfortunately. 24% of the US Congress is comprised of women. That includes 26 women in the Senate and 101 in the House. When you look at statewide elected office, that's governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, state attorney generals, agriculture, whatever they have, there's 29% of that is comprised of 29% women. That's the same percentage that we have in state legislatures nationwide. So state legislatures nationwide, 29% of women. Mayors of cities, over 30,000 population, we've got 23%. So how does Nebraska rank in all this? Nebraska has a congressional delegation of 5, and we have 1 US Senator, Deb Fisher. No women serve in statewide elected office in Nebraska. So I want to give you that to a challenge. We don't have any women serving in statewide elected office in Nebraska. Our legislature currently is made up of 28.6% women. That's slightly below the national average of 29%. So that ranks us 28% in the country. I do want to note also that in 2021, I believe we'll have 1 less woman senator in the Nebraska legislature. Anna might be able to talk about that, but and I think something remarkable really. So in the 3 legislative districts that are completely within Sarpy County, they'll all be represented by women, which my guess is for the first time ever. Also, we do pretty well when you look at mayors of cities. In addition to this 30,000 mark, there's other data showing that of cities 100,000 and more, we actually have 2 women in that group, as our 2 largest cities, Lincoln and Omaha, both have women mayors. Now, with that introduction, I'm going to turn the program over to questions for the panelists. And Anna, we're going to have everybody answer this. We're going to kind of change the rotation a little bit with each question. But my first question is, and we're going to throw this out to Anna first, is that how did you become involved in politics in your elected office role, and then the others appointed in advocacy? So Anna, how did you first get involved in politics?
Well, Diane, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this panel discussion. And thank you to everyone tuning in who's part of League of Women Voters. You do just such a great nonpartisan job of keeping women voters educated on issues that matter to us. So I got involved in politics kind of in a non-traditional way. When I was in high school, I was very involved in constitutional debate. I was part of the We the People team. We went to nationals. I was very interested in the history of policy and civics, but I was not at all politically involved, and really wasn't politically involved at all going through college. I went for film studies degree, thought I was going to go into the film industry, produce movies, do documentaries, that kind of stuff. But I was home back in Nebraska because I knew I wanted to live in Nebraska. You can't find kinder people anywhere in the world, in my opinion. And so I knew I wanted to come back here and take root. And it's very hard. There isn't a budding film industry here. So I was kind of just trying to figure out what to do. And I ended up going to a women's luncheon celebrating Helen Busalis, which is Lincoln's first female mayor. We have one annually every year. And I was there with my mom, and Senator Amanda McGill got up to speak. She was the keynote speaker. And at the time she was 26 when she was elected, and I was around 26. And she spoke directly to the young women in the audience that day and said, you really need to get involved in running for office, and don't let anyone tell you to wait. There needs to be diversity of representation, and that means more women elected, but also there are very few young women elected in office. And we can kind of get into a lot of the reasons why that happens. And it just hit me like a brick wall. Seeing someone who was basically my age, elected at my age, really brought in something in me that I think probably as a young girl I always would have been interested in, but I didn't get to see that. And it's interesting because I asked some of my male friends who were in constitutional debate with me whether they thought about running for office, and they were like, oh yeah, we look in the mirror and we thought about running. And I think part of that is, they could just see themselves as young kids in adults who were serving, and I didn't have that opportunity. I turned to my mom that day at that luncheon and said, I want to do this. I want to commit to some level of public service. And so I looked around and did my research on sort of what were some of the elected positions in Lincoln where I live. And one of them that was coming up was the airport authority. And I have a ton of pilots in my family. My mom's side of the family, we are an aviation centered in terms of career family. And I thought that's a natural fit. And I ran for that position. I called every single woman in Lincoln, over and over again, and ended up as a 26-year-old beating the chair of the board, taking his position and serving on there for 6 years. It's the best thing I've ever done because it was a nonpartisan board. I got to serve with some really talented business leaders in the community, and they really mentored me and taught me a lot and prepared me to run for legislature.
Great. Well, and what Anna was referring to is political ambition. And if we want to do it during the question and answer, we can tell the difference between looking in the mirror and saying, I'm ready to run, and women that have to convince themselves. So Anna, thank you for breaking that barrier of ambition. Now we'll turn to Michelle and let us know a little bit, Michelle, on how you became involved in politics. Oh, you need to unmute yourself. Okay.
Does that help?
Yes, that's good.
I was entertaining myself. I apologize to everybody. I was saying first, I wanted to echo Anna's words and thank you for the opportunity to participate today in the discussion. It is a very special privilege. My story is short. I got my start as an intern in political campaigns in the 90s. I became very active in local politics and started my own consulting business. And when I moved to Nebraska 22 years ago, I was fortunate. I was able to continue my business, and I ended up working for candidates running for mayor and governor and Congress and even president. So I'd always been behind the scenes and seeing what it takes to stay in a position of leadership and the tolls it can take and the commitment you need to have. So prior to my appointment in 2017, I had served as a legislative aide for a Nebraska senator. And during that time, I met many incredible women, including Senator Wishart, that were actively working to serve their community on a larger scale. And that was really inspiring to me. It was really neat when Senator Wishart decided to run, and it was just neat to see her story unfold and have her see her get elected. So in 2017, the Sarpy County Election Commissioner position became open for applications. And having worked in the election realm for so many years, I was really interested in the opportunity to serve my fellow voters and citizens at the county level, ensuring that every vote would count. So I took a leap of faith and took on a little extra courage and applied for an interview with the governor. And 1 week later, he called and he asked if I'd like to accept the appointment to serve as the Sarpy County's next election commissioner. And it was such an honor. And I just got a little teary because I was very excited. I knew that I was about to do something new and find a new way to serve and give back to my friends, my neighbors, and my community in a way that I wanted to make a big difference.
All right. Thank you, Michelle. Now we'll turn to Toni. And Toni, let us know how you got involved in politics in your current advocacy role across organizations.
Yes, definitely. I echo the privilege of being on this panel. I'm really honored to be here with you all, amazing women in public office. So my story is a little bit similar to Anna's. I did competitive forensics, speech and debate in high school as well. So I was used to researching and advocating on behalf of issues. So that kind of sparked my interest as to, what is politics all about? Is it really politics in the sense of the word, or can I make a bigger impact? And so I went on to attend UNO, and my undergraduate degree is in political science. And so I voted in elections when I could. The first time was my freshman year in 2008, voting for Barack Obama. So that was a special moment in itself. But I kind of went through my undergraduate career knowing that I was interested in different facets of political science, but I kind of was more interested in the legal aspect of things. My main focus was, using political science as a gateway to possibly getting into law. So that was kind of my focus. I was really interested in political psychology, which is all about why people vote in the way that they do, and the criteria that they utilize to determine who they feel is the best fit for public office. So that sparked my interest, but I didn't really feel drawn to political office or being involved in politics at that time. And then actually after I graduated from college, I ended up connecting with the League of Women Voters and doing some voter registration drives on campus via my sorority. And so it's kind of a full circle kind of experience. So I worked with the League in setting up some of those voter registration drives simply because I wanted to make sure that young people, which that's still a passion of mine, young people are engaged in our process and engaged in civic engagement because they have lots of great ideas and passion that goes along with that. And so I worked with the League with voter registration drives and also working with our anniversary of the 100th of the 19th Amendment, the 100th anniversary committee as well. And it was kind of all she wrote at that point. I became involved with the voter services team and really took the ability to impact young people and communities of color as well, because voting isn't always the most central idea in some of those communities because there are so many other competing factors. And so I found it as an opportunity to be representative in the realm of voting and voting rights advocacy. And here I am. So that's kind of my journey.
Thank you. So my next question, and we'll have Michelle answer this first, and then Anna, and then Toni. Do you believe women serving as public officials, activists, and or voters impact the political process? And if so, how?
I absolutely believe that women serving their communities in any capacity has an impact on the political process. Throughout my life, I've had many female friends of all different political affiliations that have made the decision to work in public service, either by election, appointment, or social activism. And in watching them, it gave me the courage and confidence to step up and take the chance to serve my community. And while I've known many men that have been good leaders, it's completely different when you see women in leadership that you can identify with in many ways, and you can watch them navigate the great and hard parts of serving their community. And I also have a great respect for women that put their name on a ballot at any level. That is a whole nother level of community service. It takes a lot to put yourself forward and ask the public to choose you to lead them. It's not an easy process, and it takes special talented people who are willing to do that.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. Now, Anna, will turn to you. And again, do you think women impact the political process? And if so, how?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And anybody who's sort of tuning in right now, just know that when women put their name in to run for office, they very often win. You know, one of the things I've noticed, and I don't tend to speak in generalizations because, you know, everyone has different personalities that they bring to the table, and it doesn't always fit, you know, with gender stereotypes. But I will say, I have noticed in this body, in working in the legislature, one thing that I admire a lot from the women leaders, and it is regardless of political party, is their ability to truly listen. And I don't know if that's just because societally in life, through the journeys we've taken, a lot of times, sometimes we end up in roles where we spend more time listening. But what I find is actually listening is one of the most important qualities for being a good leader, because one, it allows you to truly understand and empathize with other people. But I also noticed that women in the legislature are able to really synthesize different issues that are going on and be the ones that come up with some creative solutions for how to create, say, a win-win solution when you have two ideas that, you know, are competing against each other. And that is it's just a huge benefit to having that type of personality in a legislative body. And I've admired that a lot of that comes from the women I serve with.
Thanks, Anna. Now, Toni, we'll hear from you on whether or not in your experiences, women impact the political process. Of course, you're affiliated with groups that are largely women in nature, not only the League of Women Voters, but your sorority, but also just what are your views on the impact of women on the political process?
Yeah, I definitely say that they are impactful in terms of the perspective and the lens by which they look at policy issues or even just advocacy. So when you talk about advocacy, it's all about mobilizing people, right? And I do think that women have an innate ability to mobilize people around an issue. And again, it may be a societal kind of trait that we have just from past that's just been carried on. But I think that the ability for women to mobilize people and for people to entrust them to provide information to them, whether that be, you know, surrounding voting rights, surrounding the issues that are going on in the community. I think that they do a really good job of leveraging their connections, and we have so many diverse connections because we play so many roles in our society. I think that their ability to mobilize people from an advocacy standpoint anyway, allows us to have a seat at the table where we may not even necessarily have been previously, or our ideas or perspectives on a policy issue, for example, to be, you know, put at the forefront because of, you know, just the innate qualities that women have. So I think that they're definitely impactful in terms of making sure that our broader community is more informed and more engaged.
This next question kind of jumps off that. And so my question for you is, based on your experiences, do you think that there are issues that women care more about, and have these issues changed over time? So in your political experiences, what issues have you found that women are interested in research tells us a couple of things, but in your experiences, and I think we're going to Anna first on this. So what issues are important to women as public officials and voters, and have they changed over time?
Well, I don't know if they have changed over time, just because I haven't experienced enough time in politics to be able to see a trend on this. I would say education is a big issue, really supporting the next generation, having supports. So I would say education is a big one that I think, regardless of political party, at least in the legislature, there is strong support from women. The other issue is we work a lot on issues in terms of violence prevention. That's a big issue. Issues like sex trafficking, public safety for women in terms of domestic assault, all of those kind of things where they're just shared experiences. You know, I talk sometimes with my legislative colleagues who are men, but you know, when I leave the Capitol at night, I do have to think through, just even walking to my car, I think through just kind of a safety strategy that's almost ingrained in me to think about, which is some things that some of my legislative colleagues don't have to think about. And so that when we bring legislation, like I worked on legislation to slow down the backlog hopefully get rid of the backlog of sexual assault evidence kits processing that we have in the state. We have about a year-long backlog. And that's, you know, mainly women who have been victimized, being able to see justice and hopefully being able to find serial perpetrators. And this was an issue where I actually had to battle a little bit to get funding for this, but I relied on my women colleagues to stand up and say, wait a minute, like this is an absolute priority for the safety of women and men. And that's an issue where violence against women is truly a thing, and a real problem in our society, and a problem for women feeling safe in their community, that is something that we share and are committed to working on together, reducing.
Okay, thanks, Anna. Now we'll turn to Michelle. And have you seen any particular issues that seem important to women in your experiences, and have they changed over time?
In my position, it's interesting, as an election official, we actually are required to kind of refrain from discussing or taking part in actual political platform and issues. But one of the things when I saw this question was coming up that I really gave thought to is one universal issue for women, especially coming into leadership, whether it's as an elected official or in a leadership position like Toni is doing, is a need for women to be respected. And I hear that quite a bit when we have women who file for office in our office, or when you're out with different civic groups talking to people. Women need to feel respected as leaders and supported by other women. And I hear that quite a bit. And one of the things I love about my position is I'm required to be nonpartisan. So regardless of political persuasion, as women, we all win when women respect and support each other. And we don't have to see eye to eye on every issue. But when, as women, we show the world that we're going to give each other support no matter what to reach our goals and go across labels and lines, it does drive the narrative of how women can make a big difference locally and globally. And I know that's not a general issue that someone runs on, but it's definitely something that I've seen out in the community when I'm talking to people who are considering running, or people who are interested in serving in civic ways. They just want to know that they're going to be supported by each other.
Great answer, Michelle. Now, Toni, what are your thoughts on this question? Are there any issues that you see women interested in, and have they changed in time over your involvement as an advocate and activist?
Yeah, I'd say maybe it's just the age gap or the age timeline, but I think that women are obviously more active in the workforce than they were, for example, in 1920 when the 19th Amendment was passed. So I think that some of their priorities have changed surrounding, employment and wage and health. And I think with our current climate, just as a society, I think that a lot of those issues have been exposed. And so I think that the women are much more keen on making sure that, people in our community that they either take care of or that they're advocating for are well represented, which is why representation is so important in public office, because we have several issues that intersect as women that we experience in our lives. But I think that the difference now is that we have so much more willpower to, be at the table, whether that be in political office or whether that be advocating on behalf of communities that we represent, looking like the person that is making the decisions about your community, I think is paramount to making sure that we are advocating for issues that are going to help everyone. And I think being a part of the League of Women Voters, we're also a nonpartisan organization, but at the same time, we advocate for issues that make sure that we're furthering democracy and the accessibility to the process for everyone. So I'd say that the issues are similar, but I think we have more tools to kind of push some of those issues forward.
All right, great. Our next question has to do with the 2020 election. As I mentioned, we had a record historical turnout nationally, but also a record turnout in Nebraska. And so my next question is, what do you think contributed to that? And I'm going back to Toni to have her answer that first with her on the ground work in this area.
Yes, so I know this probably sounds a little cliche, but I really think the pandemic, the pandemic that we found ourselves in, while it has produced some very negative consequences in our society, I personally don't believe when it comes to voter education surrounding vote by mail, for example, there are plenty of communities in which I worked with directly that had no idea that that method of participating in the process even existed, or they thought that the process was just so complicated and cumbersome that they, never would use it, or they were skeptical of the process in general. So I think that public officials and others in leadership that were pushing forward the idea that to keep yourself safe and healthy, this is the best method for you to be able to participate in the process. I think that voting by mail gave people another method, and for some people, a better method to where they didn't have to take off of work or rearrange their schedules to go and vote at a polling place. So I think that voting by mail is one aspect of it. And I also think young people, with everything that's going on in our society currently and continues to occur in our society, research shows that young people vote based on the issues, not necessarily based on party lines or based on any individual candidate even. And so I think the climate in which we found ourselves for this election motivated a lot of young people to become more passionate about the process, and they realized that voting was one aspect of that they could get involved in to push some of the ideas and the issues that they're most passionate about forward. So I think that was two demographics of people that definitely increased in our electorate just from the climate that we found ourselves in.
Question. And youth voters were up this year. So Michelle, I'm interested in your ideas about this. You're on the ground too as a county election official. So what do you think contributed to our record turnout this year in Nebraska?
I would have to agree with some of the things everything so far that Toni has said. The youth got very involved this year. I think the pandemic played a role in it. In Sarpy County, we had 80% turnout for the general, just under. It was like 79.5 something. So we're claiming 80. But one of the things that we did in our county when I started hearing about the pandemic and some of the restrictions that would be put out there, I have loved ones that are high risk, and we were the first county that went ahead and said, hey, you know what, we're going to send postcards to everybody, because most people don't know you can apply for a ballot with a postcard. And that was a priority to us to make sure that people could still early vote, especially when early voting got shut down in person for the 30 days prior to the election during the primary. That was our way of reaching out to the community and making sure that people who didn't want to have to leave their house for any reason could mail us those postcards. We'd mail them a ballot. They could get it back to us by mail or putting it in a drop box. One of the other things that I am finding, at least in watching what's going on here, is more people seem to be taking a personal and involved approach to how they want to see things happen at the local and national government level. There's so many organizations locally and nationwide, and especially the League of Women Voters, that have done great messaging and voter turnout programs this year and years gone by. And I think as far as women getting involved in the whole process, we're slowly seeing more women of different backgrounds and political affiliations win seats that we never before thought were possible. I know we're still only at about 24% of women holding seats, but we now have our first female vice president of the United States. And regardless of any political persuasions, I think that should be really exciting for all women. I see it as a win and a sign for women that the glass ceilings are cracking. They may not be totally broken yet, but women are definitely achieving monumental changes and accomplishments in the realm of leadership. And just a quick note from Sarpy, this year for the 2020 general, we had 50,000 women or individuals that identify as female vote in the general. And we had 44,000 voters participate who self-identify as male, and then about 2,000 others. So women outpaced men in our election by 5,500 votes. So that's really exciting too. And that does hold true to the approximate 52%, 48% rates that men and women seem to vote in.
Thank you, Michelle. And so now we'll hear from Anna, and you might have a little different perspective campaigning in COVID. And what did you hear from as you campaigned as far as what you were feeling about voter turnout this year?
Well, I will echo everything that Michelle and Toni have said. I think that it says my internet's unstable. Can you all hear me all right? Okay, great. I think the vote by mail was a huge help, and from leaders like Michelle and our Secretary of State, Bob Ebnen, that was huge, especially for women, because if you look statistically, we still make up a larger portion of caretakers in not only the workforce, but also our homes. And so being able to have the flexibility of voting by mail was really big. And like Michelle said, and I was this way before as well, I always had the tradition of going and voting in person until I learned about the fact that I could vote by mail, and having that flexibility, but also having the ability then to really be able to study the candidates and take some time while I'm determining who I'm going to vote for is helpful as well with vote by mail. So I thought that was huge. On top of that, just thinking about caretakers, there's a lot of women in this state because of the pandemic who are taking care of loved ones who are in that high risk category. So again, having the opportunity to stay safe when you're voting and to kind of stay in your sort of bubble, social distance bubble, was very helpful as well. So I think the vote by mail was huge for women. I wanted to add one more thing from the last sort of question, and I think it's something that moving forward, especially in 2021, as we're starting to grapple with some of the fallout that has occurred this year because of the pandemic, the residual fallout. When we look at the workforce, there were a lot of women that had to make a choice when schools shut down of what they were going to do in terms of childcare. And this disproportionately, and I'm going to follow up and look into the statistics on Nebraska specifically, but we're seeing that issues around finding childcare and making that decision about whether you stay in the workforce or whether you have to take care of your child when you cannot find childcare, it disproportionately impacts women. And we all know that if you take some time off of work, it can be harder to get back into the workforce at the same pay scale, meeting the same career ambitions that you had. And this, again, disproportionately impacts women. And I think it's an issue that regardless of political party, any women elected official we really should rally around each other in policies that make sure we support women being able to get back on their feet next year, those who have been really hit hard. And one of the ways to do that is making sure that there is quality childcare available for every single family, so that if a woman chooses to work, she's able to do that and continue her career ambitions while also having a family.
Okay, I had a few more questions, but I think with the time that we have remaining, I want to make sure that we have enough time for our audience to ask questions on Facebook, and you can continue to put your comments on the Facebook comment column. First, though, I want to thank our great, there's my dog barking, and there's someone on my roof now too. So I'm going to turn it over to Mary Yeager. Thank you. We all learned a lot from your experiences. I'm going to mute myself, turn it over to Mary, and we'll take questions from the audience.
Thank you, Diane. I'm Mary Yeager, and I'm pleased to be on the staff at Humanities Nebraska and to be participating in these programs. And my role is to relay questions from our audience to you all. And I will begin with a question. I overlapped my thing here. Let me get back to it. What can we do going forward to ensure that the voting and election participation numbers of women continue to grow? And you addressed this a little bit, Anna and others, but are there other thoughts in this area?
I'm going to suggest that Michelle go first. This is one of the things that she had actually contributed to the questions. And so I think she's ready to answer that.
Yeah, I think education is the biggest part, and education on voting and the accessibility and your rights as a voter, and how you can vote and how easy it actually can be when everything is done right to make that accessible to the voters. I had kind of written a little bit about that. I'm always surprised when I go to do like registration drives. League of Women Voters has invited me to participate in high school registration drives. And it's always interesting when you talk to the young people, they're surprised that registration is as easy as it is now. But I don't know if we do a great job, either maybe nationwide or locally or on the state level, of always getting that message out there. We need to find ways to better educate people, to let them know if you have a state ID or a driver's license, you can register in your jammies from your bed on your computer. Or if you don't have one of those, you can come into our office and it takes 5 minutes, or you can mail one in. There's different ways that people can register. And I almost think that might be the most daunting part, is getting registered and understanding what people can and can't vote for, and making sure they know where the polls are. If they don't want to vote by mail, that they know where their polling sites are. And I think everybody statewide is working on that. I know our website, you can go on there and just type in your address and it shows you an exact location of where you can go do that. But in general, just education, and with social media and free media now, where we don't have to do earned airtime, it does help a lot. And we have done some good partnerships with our local television stations. I think they did, at least locally in our market. I noticed I kind of pushed. I called a few of the news directors and said, oh, I guess Sarpy County is not your market. So, and they didn't like that. And they started putting more things out there about voting in Sarpy County and making sure the voters knew. So sometimes you have to poke them a little, but education on how, when, where, and your rights as a voter.
Okay, it seems like a huge hurdle that remains for women in politics today is how people perceive assertiveness in a woman in office versus a man. How do women in office overcome that double standard?
Well, I'm not going to answer. I'm going to turn to Anna maybe first because she ran, but it certainly hits on the research that has been done on gendered. Actually, I do a lot of my research on the media coverage of women. And so Anna, would you talk a little bit about, have you found any of those double standards in your political life?
Oh, sure, definitely. I think one thing, first and foremost, is as women, we have a responsibility to stand up for each other. And I feel that way, like, it doesn't matter what political party someone belongs to. I have train myself. When I see another woman colleague of mine having rumors spread about her, I will shut that down. When I see another woman colleague of mine getting interrupted, I will make sure to say, oh, excuse me, I'd like to hear what so-and-so has to say since she didn't get to finish. So I think part of it is on us to stand up for each other and make sure that our voices are heard. I'd say the other thing, and I've always felt this way, is, you know, there are a lot of double standards that can exist. And I want to thank all the women who have come before us, who have paved the way in getting rid of some of those double standards, so that a lot of us here today can be in the positions we're in. The one thing I will say, though, is with every challenge comes a benefit and a silver lining. And I do find that because sometimes there does exist double standards in terms of assertiveness or how much you need to be prepared for a meeting and back up what you're saying with facts, it has made me a better senator because of that. A lot of times I'll show up to a meeting and the women in that room, we are by far the most prepared people in that room. We've had to do our homework. We've had to be prepared to defend ourselves. And I actually think that's a benefit because, you know, it has taught me all the skills that I'll need to know to be successful, not only in my, you know, kind of short-lived career in politics, but also in my life as a person. And so I do see those challenges that we have and that we still have as women. I do see there being some benefit, again, to us, you know, overcoming them. So yeah, I'm interested in what Toni and Michelle have to say.
Yeah, I guess I can go next. So for me, I definitely agree with a lot of what Anna said, but there's also, in working in any kind of advocacy role in any public office or otherwise, I think there's a lot of intersectionality, right, in the way that we operate. And so, you know, for me, I'm a woman, but I'm also a woman of color. And so the intersectionality that comes with that, I think it's given me an opportunity to kind of push forward some of my lived experiences within, you know, advocating obviously for voting rights for everyone, but we all know that there are disparities and sometimes barriers, thankfully not in Nebraska in terms of voter ID or anything like that, because we as a league have fought against that for several years, but there are just different lived experiences. And so I think that the ability to be at the table and be an advocate and a representative, not to say for a whole community, but someone that looks like you representing the issues in which you care about at the table, I think makes such a difference in, you know, we talk about, you know, how to keep women engaged. I think advocacy is all about empowering people. Like, you're not really a leader until you've empowered other people to step in, because the goal of advocacy isn't for, you know, one person to advocate for the same thing for 20 years. It's that we're bringing other people alongside us so that they're able to take on roles as well. So I kind of view it in that way. You know, I have to be on my toes because I'm, you know, a representative and pushing forward, you know, and advocating for a community that doesn't always have the same accessibility and resources. So.
You have spoken about some of these, but are there other barriers you would identify to women being involved in politics today?
Michelle, do you want to take that first and then maybe have the other two log in as well?
Watching from the outside through the consulting business I had working with candidates, I would have to tell you that in my career, about 80% of the people I worked with were gentlemen. And that a lot of that came with women not realizing that, you know what, you have a right to be at that table and your voice does matter. And sometimes your voice might be more right than the voice across the table. And so I think that kind of comes into play.
One of the
Well,
things, okay, Anna, go ahead. But one of the things Anna said earlier, it's absolutely true. We don't have the representation we need of women because they're not running. Women actually win at the same or higher rates than men. And so, Anna, I guess.
yeah, I think, one of the kind of obvious ones is that, if women are looking at starting a family, we have very few women in office who have had children while they served. And that's something where, especially if you're a younger woman, it's something you really do have to just logistically think about. And so I think, that's a challenge. And it's one where I really love to see the women who have, Senator Michaela Cavanaugh, for example, she was still breastfeeding when she got elected to the legislature. And so she had her little one in the legislature. Talk about, and she convinced our Capitol to put in an actual clean breastfeeding room. Because you know where the breastfeeding room used to be in the Capitol? In the women's restroom, of all places. That is not a place where you want to breastfeed your little one. And she was able to advocate for that because she had that experience that, frankly, I think before it was Senator Conrad was one of the only few other women who have ever been pregnant while serving in office. And so again, that is just a barrier that women experience. And so I just love it when women break through that barrier and give examples then to other women that, you know what, you really can, you can do it all. So anybody that's out there thinking about running, definitely do it. You can do it, and you'll have a group of women who will absolutely support you in taking that leap.
Great. Another question, and I know you've talked about some of these things in talking about listening, synthesizing, mobilizing, but how do we encourage working together in an age of extreme polarization?
I think some of the discussion today, even just the opportunity to do this and come together as women across the state and locally and just verbalize that we want to be supportive of each other. And I think that's part of it. 50% of it is knowing that you're going to have the backing of your fellow female citizens, voters, friends, family. That's just huge, that getting that message out there that no matter what, you know what, we're going to be here to support each other because it's important.
Yeah, I will add, Michelle and I are kind of an example. We were both staff members. I believe we were both staff members together in the Capitol, working for different senators. And I always knew she was going places and have been sort of a cheerleader watching her do that. And both of us are from different political parties. And it just doesn't matter, because when you see another woman who has so many talents and abilities rise up into the position that you knew, they should be in a leadership role, it doesn't matter what political party they belong to. It's a win for all women. The other thing I'll say is, it is really disappointing that we are becoming more and more polarized. I think some of that is you see on social media, but actually when you see people in person together, you don't see that level of polarization. So I always say, when we're just out and about being with each other, and it's hard to do that right now in a pandemic, which I think, exaggerates then all of that too, but really human to human, people generally speaking are still kind to each other. But I will say, I have never understood the desire to sort of live in an echo chamber of your own thoughts, only surrounded by people that think like you, just like a group of yes people. I really like being around people that challenge me. I actually gravitate towards that because one, it strengthens what you feel because you have to defend that, or two, you learn something new and you actually learn to think a different way. And so I would encourage everybody who's listening, really think about when you're thinking about who your group of mentors are, who are helping you make the tough decisions in life, big life decisions, make sure you surround yourself with people who are also going to challenge what you think. And in politics, we really need to start thinking more that way. It's actually good to have someone working on your team who thinks very differently than you, because most of the time when you're working on policy, actually what comes out is a marriage of different ideas. And that's when you get a really good solution that benefits the most people.
I don't know if I can just respond to Anna first. Thank you for the kind words, but I think she knows I feel the same way about her when she announced, and that's what's important about this. This is not just the two of us communicating back and forth. This is what needs to happen. I don't know where my film went, but when I knew that she was going to run, I didn't see a person of a different party. All I saw was someone with great ability and a heart for our state. And it made me so excited, and that she was a lady. It was just really neat. And that's what's important, is knowing the person and their heart and their abilities. And so we need to keep that in mind when we're supporting people, is don't look at party lines, look at ability, heart, and the desire to serve.
Great words. What do you think? Oh, I'll start with Anna on this one. Do you think being a unicameral is a benefit for attracting women candidates?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I apologize, I have to run to another meeting. We are determining some leadership and voting on that, so I have to head out. But absolutely, nonpartisanship, I think, is something that is a draw for a lot of women that I talk to. And so I'm a huge advocate for the unicameral, and I think us having a unicameral in this state benefits women getting elected. It's just, more of us have got to run for office. So that's my call to action. Think about running. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for your service to the state, Anna. We will end with a question for Toni and Michelle, and maybe Dianne too. But what are your goals as women political leaders and advocates in 2021?
Well, I guess I'll start. In being an advocacy, there's so many different avenues that I can take, and I have to pare them down because I'm just that kind of person. But I would say my primary goals are to continue our Vote for 1-1 expansion that Dianne mentioned earlier. I think that we definitely want to make sure that piece of information is, accessible and people are aware of it. So maintaining the visibility of that. I'd also say continuing to keep young people civically engaged, that it doesn't just stop with, the federal election that we have. We have local elections and down ballot elections that are coming up in the spring. So continuing to mobilize young people and their energy and talents in moving, civic engagement forward, whether that be running for office or playing whatever role they feel like fits them. And then lastly, I'd just say making sure that we all have the same opportunity to participate in the process, that we don't have any barriers that might come along from, public officials in our state or otherwise, just keeping an ear to the ground so that we make sure that we're making the opportunity to participate in the process as easy and simple as possible so we can continue the momentum that we currently have. So.
Thank you. Michelle, you want to add anything?
I would have to echo just everything that Toni has said. My goals for the coming year or coming years are to do many of the things that she's talked about and kind of continue finding ways to work with the legislature each year. The election commissioners and election officials go up and work on legislation to help make voting better, whether it's for registration or for how elections are run or what kind of information is shared. But I definitely have some ideas for for some legislation. I hope that'll be brought forward to make registration easier for voters, possibly extending dates of when we can do those. But just definitely continuing on with educating voters, working with newly naturalized citizens and young people and everyone in between.
Wonderful. Well, that brings us to the end of our hour. And I want to thank our panelists and thank Dianne for creating this program and inviting our panelists. It was wonderful. We'll just share with you all that, we did a drawing for Jailed for Freedom, which is the book written by Doris Stevens, a suffragette from originally from Omaha. And the winner of our drawing is Della Bauer. So we'll be getting in touch with her to get her that book. We'll also be sending out an evaluation form to everyone that registered. If you're not registered, you still can. You can also find the evaluation on our Facebook page or humanitiesnebraska.org/vote. And we really appreciate your taking the time to do that. It helps us to complete our required reports for the Mellon Foundation that funded this program. And we'll also be drawing for another book from those who submit the evaluation. So a little more incentive. We will be back in February with some additional programming on civil rights and the Voting Rights Act. And just want to leave you again with the mission of Humanities Nebraska to help Nebraskans explore and connect us and makes us human. With that, I will say thank you again to all of you, and we will see you in February. Thank you.